Got a little bit of an interesting discussion for today, and I was kind of thinking about monarchs and just how much I really don't like Edea, and it just feels like, oh, that's an Exodia deck. Whoopsie. So Edea is like, people will argue it's like the best card in the deck. It's amazing because you normal summon it, you get another guy out, you get an extra tribute summon. You ban it when it gets your banished stuff back and stuff, and it's really cool for the grind games and the mirror match, and that's all well and true. But I actually definitely after a lot of testing of monarchs and stuff, I kind of came to the conclusion that I really don't like this card, and that's for the following reasons. I think that it's the fact that you normal summon it, so automatically it's at risk of things like Solemn Strike and Veiler, and as we all know, having your idea interrupted in any shape or form is you pass your turn, and that's really slow for me, especially in a format where Cosmos are running around with multiple traps. It feels like it's just really risky summoning an idea, and a lot of the time turn one, if you're playing against like Cosmo and they set 3, like you're gonna try play around the set card, and you're going to be trying to like summon out Erebus or something instead, and you're probably thinking, well, you can just Solemn Strike Erebus. Yeah, sure, but the way the Quantum engine has been working so far is, you're going to be playing multiple Return of the Monarchs and stuff like that, so you can go Chainlink 1 Erebus, Chainlink 2 Erebus to protect it from being striked, etc. So there's a lot of advantages to just summoning out a Monarch straight up with something like Prime or Stormforth turn 1 with Dominion, rather than summoning Idea. So argument number one as to why I don't like Edea is the fact that it's really vulnerable, and you're probably thinking like, okay, lots of cards are vulnerable, why this one specifically? Because like I said, unlike other cards, like you don't just pass your turn when Edea gets when a different monarch gets stopped. If you're playing other cards that let you tribute multiple times per turn, which I'll get into in a moment. Now the other card that makes this card really worth playing, I think is the best reason that this card is played, is because of Idos. Now Idea on the normal summon is pretty poor. It's not really anything particularly amazing, but what's amazing about this combo is the fact that you banish Idos and you special Idea from your graveyard, and it gets you another Idos from your deck, and you do that loop every turn. That's really good. It's really strong. You bring out 2 free tribute fodders and you get 2 tribute summons that turn. That is really good. And I'm not denying that, of course, but this is the only good thing about Idos, is the fact that it gives you 2 tribute summons in a turn, and in a format, I guess in a state of a game where, it's 2016 and we're relying on tribute summons, you don't really want to be doing that, so you need your extra tribute summons, because 1 tribute summon per turn as your deck's power play isn't very ideal in 2016. So in thinking about Idos and how it's really good because of the fact that you get that extra tribute summon, you're probably going to be playing like 2 and 2 at least. So you now have 2 of these guys and 2 of Idos, right? Now this is the second reason why I don't like this, is because of the fact you're going to be drawing multiples. So if you're playing 3 and 3, you're definitely going to be drawing multiples like some point in time. Now you're probably thinking, right, okay, but what about the fact that multiples, every deck has like bad multiples, you don't want like multiple Farm Girl in your hand, you don't want like multiple Tin Can in your hand, potentially, kind of, maybe. You don't want multiple Erebus in your hand, like, because it doesn't do anything for you that turn. But I would argue that really pretty much every other Monarch card is okay in multiples. There's nothing wrong with having multiple Stormforth or Monarchs in your hand, because you have things like Escalation if you play it, you have things like, your next turn. You're probably thinking like, well, you can just use Idea next turn. The thing is, if you draw multiple Idea, you're not going to use that Idea on your turn. You're going to use the Idea in your graveyard. So you use the Idos in your graveyard to banish yourself, special summon Idea from your graveyard. Idea gets Idos from your graveyard, from your deck, and now you have your 2 tribute summons. So what's the multiple Idea in your hand doing in your turn? And this is the biggest issue I have with this deck, is the fact that multiples of this card, which you draw so often because of the fact that you have Pantheism, so you're deck thinning a lot. You have Pantheism in the graveyard, so you're deck thinning a lot again. you have your monarchs, which you're sending 2 spell or trap cards from your deck to your graveyard every single turn, even on your opponent's turn with things like Aether. And this gives you so much deck thinning. You know, by like turn 2 or turn 3, you could probably have like 20 cards left in your deck, which means you are going to draw the next Idea and Eidos, like almost like guaranteed, especially if you're playing 3 and 3. I don't need to go over how bad multiple Idos is in your hand. Multiple Idea in your hand is, you know, that is just as bad, really, like, because it doesn't do anything. And the issue I have here is the fact that drawing these cards in multiples do nothing. They have absolutely no use in your hand. There is not one single use that a multiple Idos would have in your hand, whereas multiple Aether works in your hand. Multiple Erebus can, you know, be not even terrible in your hand. Multiple Pantheism isn't bad in your hand. Multiple Primes isn't even that bad in your hand, because you can Pantheism away and then recycle by setting it and stuff like that. Like, there's every other card in the Monarch deck is okay in multiples. It's not great, but it has some use. There is some use to multiple Monarch cards in your hand. There is no use whatsoever in having these guys in your hand. So imagine you're playing like 2 and 2, or, you know, in the worst case scenario, 3 and 3. If you're playing 3 and 3, you're going to be drawing these like in multiples so often. You're going to be Pantheisming into multiples of them so often, and it's just like, it does nothing in your hand. Honestly, I would have like Anti-Raigeki as a card I would rather draw than a multiple Eidos or Idea after I've established that initial loop, because Anti-Raigeki is going to like stop me from Raigeki. That's one more use than these cards in multiples, which have 0. These cards have 0, none, nada, nothing at all. Cannot like do anything for you in your hand in multiples. So I really don't like them. And you're probably thinking like, okay, so what's the alternative? Well, this is the alternative. Hang on, just quickly, right? So to go over like my main arguments, the pros and cons. Okay, so the pros of Idea and Eidos, the loop of getting multiple tribute summons per turn twice, two tribute summons per turn, and you have that loop recurrent. Okay, that's a very good argument. That's the best argument for this card. But I don't think it warrants the cons, which I'll get into in a second. But my argument against this would be the fact that because you're drawing the rest of your Ideas and Eidos so often with Pantheism, with deck thinning, etc., etc., with Prime, what's going to happen is that you're going to resolve the graveyard effect of Eidos like twice at a maximum if you haven't drawn the rest of your Ideas. Do you know what I mean? So you're not going to get, if you play 3 and 3, you're not going to get that effect 3 times. You're not going to get that effect 3 times like every turn, every game, because you will draw those multiples very often because of how much you deck them. Like I said, turn 2 or 3, you will be down to like 20 cards in your deck because of constantly sending with Aether on your opponent's turn, Erebus on your turn, and then again on your own turn, and then Pantheism's going to deck thin for you in the graveyard. It's so much deck thinning and drawing that seeing these in multiples will happen almost every single game, and it's like they're blank cards in your hand after you draw them. They do nothing in your hand. So that's my argument against that pro point number 1. The pro point number 2 is the banish recursion of Idea. That's really, really good in the grind game. My only issue with this is the fact that the grind game, like, you don't want to be lasting that long with Monarchs, really. And again, like I said, because you're drawing multiples of Idea and Eidos, you're not actually going to resolve the banish recursion effect of Idea more than like twice, really. You know, because of all the multiples you're drawing. So yes, those 2 extra add-backs from your Banish Stone might be clutch. I don't feel like it's enough to warrant like just drawing into bad cards. You know, because you need to draw into better Monarchs, you need to draw into power cards, you need to draw into your Tenacities and things like that. And these do nothing. They just don't do that. You know, you want to see hand traps and stuff. That's what you want to draw into. You don't want to draw into another Idos because, like I said, Anti-Raigeki is a better card than Idos. Like after you've established that loop, because it does nothing on the field. So here's like what I've been playing recently, if I can find it. And yeah, this I feel like is what I've like, you know, after a lot of testing, I feel like is a really, really good deck, because there isn't any card in here that's bad for you in multiples. And yeah, I've cut all the baby Monarchs apart from 3 Mithra. I'm playing 3 Mithra, and you're probably wondering, why are you playing 3 Mithra? Mithra doesn't take up your normal summon. Mithra gives you everything that Idea and Eidos do without the normal summon, without the issue of drawing multiples. I feel like it's just so much better. Yes, you don't get two tributes, two tribute fodders, that's fine, but you do get two tribute summons. The token on your opponent's field is a little bit annoying, sure, but like the fact that you get a second tribute summon for special summoning it, I think is amazing. And when you're playing the Quantum build, you have 3 E-Telly, 3 Red Layer, so you have 6 ways to get extra tribute fodder on the field before you summon your Mithra, and you have tribute summons in the shape of 3 Red Layer and all your monarchs with 3 return, which means that you're going to be able to get to your Aether a lot faster. You're going to get to your Erebus turn 1. I've even considered adding a Thestalos to this deck because I'm not playing 41 cards, but I'm just putting it in so you can see. But basically, if you play Thestalos, you can essentially like turn 1 if you open like a Mithra and like just a bunch of generic monarch spell or traps. You can go turn 1 Mithra special, Dominion reduce the level of Erebus, normal summon Erebus, pitch a card out their hand, and then search the Thestalos off the return, and then you can summon out Prime because you sent it with Erebus. Summon Prime, now you have 2 tribute fall, or just tribute over Erebus if you want. And then you can normal summon the Thestalos, and you've ripped 2 cards out of your opponent's hand turn 1 just with a Mithra. You can't do that turn 1 with Idea and Eidos. Mid game or whatever, like Idea and Eidos are, you know, a little bit better if you haven't drawn them. That's the issue. Drawing into any of these cards, like through Pantheism, through Prime, etc., etc., is not a bad thing. You're drawing into a Mithra, which you're going to use next turn to get 2 tribute summons. Sure, it's not searchable like Idos is when it's in the graveyard after turn 1. Assuming you get it there turn 1, you're drawing into your E-Tellys, which are always going to be live because Blue Lair can shuffle itself away, so you're going to get extra tribute fodder. You're going to get this guy to your hand, so you're deck thinning and drawing into better cards rather than multiple Idea and Eidos. And that's essentially all I wanted to say, is like, I feel like Idea and Eidos aren't good enough to be played anymore. I just, after much testing, after multiple times of bricking, like how much do you guys brick with this Monarch deck? We all know just how horrible the deck is for its consistency sometimes. And it's like, I would just rather play better cards that, you know, drawing into would be just, you know, give me some sort of way to advance my game state rather than sitting there with blank cards in my hand. Literally blank cards. And yeah, that's all I have to say. The Quantum deck, I go into this in a lot of detail as to why I think the Quantum version is better. There's a Quantum deck profile in my channel, just scroll down and look for it. I'll leave it in the description as well. But that's essentially the main argument that I wanted to have today, was just to tell you guys that I think that Idea and Eidos just should be cut. Just straight up, just cut them, honestly. I'd rather have Mithra turn 1 because then I can potentially Erebus Thestalos in turn 1. I'd rather have, you know, I'd rather draw into Mithra than another Idos when, you know, I've already got the Idos in my grave. Because like I said, the best thing about Idea and Eidos is the fact that you get 2 tribute summons per turn, which Mithra does. You know, Mithra does that, it can't be negated, I think. So you contribute it, they can't negate that. You're playing 3 returns in the Quantum version, so it means that you're going to be like being able to protect your guys from Solemn Strike. Like I said, you go Chainlink 1 Aether or Erebus and then Chainlink 2 a return. They can't strike your guy. It's really, 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 really good. And I think that summarizes it. Go over again once more. Pros and cons of Idea. You have the loop that gives you 2 free tribute summons and fodder per turn. I feel like you could just play Mithra instead. It gives you a lot more consistency that way. You're not drawing into multiples. And number 2, the Banish recursion is good, I agree, but you know, I feel like with proper management of Prime and, you know, not bricking, like just by drawing into better cards, you're going to be winning that game anyway, I feel like, rather than relying on cards that, you know, when you draw them do nothing at all. And that's pretty much everything I want to say, guys. So if you agree, if you disagree, I'd like to get a discussion going. Let me know what you think. Like, just try that. Like, try this build. Like, I don't know what I would cut as the 41st card. Maybe a Kuraz or something like that, potentially. And, you know, just because I really, really like the Thestalos. Try this out for yourself, honestly, and just test it and see if you think the consistencies work. Is this more consistent? is it better than drawing the multiple Idea and Eidos? Like, I feel like Idea and Eidos make your bad hands really bad and your good hands really good. And I'd rather just have a more consistent hand altogether across a big event. Do you know what I mean? So, in conclusion, cut Idea and Eidos for 3 Mithra, play better cards like the Quantums, etc, etc, and you'll be happy, and you'll be not breaking. That's the idea. So, yeah, let me know what you think. I'd like to hear your arguments for and against. And as usual, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
So foolish.